Diana Weymar is a US-based embroidery artist and curator, most well known for the Tiny Pricks project. The project began in 2018 as a one-off artwork, with Weymar hastily stitching "I am a very stable genius," a quote that had come from Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America at the time. So inspired was she by the words of this man that she went on to stitch many more of his phrases to point out the idiosyncrasies and inaccuracies of what he was saying, and to capture moments in time in which the world seemed somewhat topsy-turvy, with a particular focus on what Donald Trump had to say. And there was a turning point in which the project stopped being just the work that Diana was doing and moved on to being a crowdsourced project. And now there are over 5,000 pieces in the Tiny Pricks project. And if you follow Tiny Pricks project on Instagram, you'll get a sense of the momentum of this fantastic crowdsourced collaborative documentary, should we say, of, I keep wanting to say the wit and wisdom, but it's neither of those things, let's face it. I don't know what your opinion is of Donald Trump. You're welcome to it, but suffice to say, there are other people who are more grounded in reality than that guy. This is the first part of our NeedleXChange, and we talk about the project. We talk about how it came to be, how it evolved into something much bigger than Diana would have ever anticipated, and some of the joys and pitfalls to be found in working with a collaborative project like this. Diana has a new book coming out very soon called Crafting a Better Life. We talk about that in the second part of the NeedleXChange, which will be here next week. But for now, this is Diana. I hope you enjoy the show. Feel free to take part in the project if the mood takes you. And I'll be back next week with the second part of the chat. Thanks for being here. Hope you're well. Enjoy the show. So here's the thing, right? So the Tiny Pricks project is like, following the Trump presidency. Trump comes to an end. You think, oh, well, that was a bit of fun. And then like 2.5 years later, he starts to rear his ugly head again or something? Like, what was that all about?
Well, I guess I've never used Trump and a bit of fun in the same sentence, but I appreciate your approach to that question, because I either get a sort of, how could you possibly have done it? Don't you need a blood transfusion from stitching so many Trump quotes? And I appreciate that you say a bit of fun, because I tried to keep it fun, but it really was when I finished doing the Trump era, the Trump chapter, I had some time to step away from it. And about 2 weeks ago, I went through over 5,000 pieces.
Bonkers, isn't it?
From the collection. I had 12 plastic bins at my in-laws' house. I brought them all downstairs. I got 4 folding tables, and I just started touching them. I just touched every single piece, and it was incredibly intense. And this is before Biden had dropped out. And I could not believe that we were in the exact same spot we had been, maybe worse, before Roe was overturned, that we were still there. Because what I realized looking back on the project and that bit of fun was that it was a kind of naive, hopeful optimism that compelled people to take up this invitation to stitch. And I know you've extended that invitation to people, and we both understand, having kind of accidentally found it, that you can apply this retroactive intentionality to stitching. But really, it kind of found me and I found it, right? We both were on the move. You're getting on a plane. I have 4 kids. I had one that played a lot of squash. I could sit into the squash courts and watch, or I could sit and make something. And so falling into it accidentally, and then inviting all of these people to take their political angst, stitch something, give it to me, a stranger, forever, is a very optimistic thing. At the time, if you'd interviewed me, I would have said, and probably when we had our first exchange, it was protest. It was upset. It was anger. It was almost as if we had no choice. We were compelled to act. And now when I see all of these pieces, and I see all of the time that went into them, and how beautiful they are. Every single, because it's starting to take its place in time in this chronology and this material record. And it's really, and I couldn't see that in the middle of it. So what it's like now is very different. And there was a period of time when it was Biden and Trump again, and it felt like the same fight, but honestly, without the same optimism, with this impending sense of doom, because I never thought he would last this long. And I don't mean he exactly, I mean the movement, I mean the direction. I'm not, believe it or not, I'm focused on his language, but not him. I don't stitch pieces about his body. I don't really, I'm not into the visual of Trump, or I used to listen to all of his speeches, but I've stopped. I always have gone to the language, and the language has gotten darker and more violent, and and it's still here. So, I think it's Masha Gessen who said, elect him once and it's sort of this misadventure of sorts. Elect him again and it's who we are.
Yeah. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice,
Yes.
shame on me, isn't it? It's exactly the same.
Whatever W said.
Yeah. But yeah, because it's fascinating. So, we're on the other side of the pond, and I stare objectively at it. And I've had a few conversations with some people I've needle exchanged with, usually after the show, because I don't really like to get too into the politics for the people listening in the year 3822, when we're all enlightened beings wondering what the hell's going on. But it's just fascinating to see. I don't know how it played out, how it played out that a man who's been convicted as a criminal can still be like one side's best option for the person to run the country in his 70s. And then the other guy who's in his 80s, like the world's most powerful country, the world's most powerful CEO. And they're just like, no, both of those seem really rational choices. Like from us, it's a really, and we're quite lucky now because we just got rid of a buffoon, followed by a nutbag, followed by a guy who is the wrong man in the wrong job. And now we've got some like adults at the helm of the country, which is a fascinating thing to have happened for like after 14 years. But it's just bewildering that the structure of politics in America can make it so that you can be found to be a criminal and that doesn't somehow preclude you from running the country. All of these structures, it's just bizarre to watch from the sidelines.
Yes, and I'm an American citizen, but I'm a permanent resident of Canada. So I grew up in Canada and I now reside in Canada, though the project keeps me back in the US most of, it's a good period of time. So the Canadians also have, we have Trudeau. So it's a very different optic and a very different person. There are people who can be unhappy, but they're not. I would say that what we're seeing in the US is a failure of systems. So it's one thing to say that somebody who's convicted of a crime, how could they go on? But the question I always think about is, how is the system failing? What does that say? So you lose faith. I think a lot of my work is about trying to sustain something material, literally, but trying to have something of sustenance in front of you that you can say this exists. Because systems, it feels like systems are breaking down. Systems are meant to protect people, help us get along, help us agree. It just, that's hard. So, I may be sort of building a fabric wall against this sort of huge wave that sometimes feels like it's crashing down. It's a time to look at all these things. And I know that we are, and we have this moment now where we have so many dramatic things happening. And I think that's head spinning. You have one person in the race, the next day you have another person. You raise millions of dollars, which in our system you kind of have to do. Drag this on, it's so expensive. And you have this pent up need and desire for joy. And you can track all that with our work that we're both doing. You're really sort of creating this timeline by seeing what people make. And so we have this great capacity for joy also. I have seen some of the most amazing things through the Trump era and through this project, which exists because of this challenging political period.
Yeah, and it must be, like you say, to arrange all the pieces and see it stimulate so much emotion. I mean, I wonder whether you start to see recurring themes, or whether, I don't know whether did you arrange them chronologically, or is that just too much of a head spinner?
So I had a lot of different things happening. First of all, I should say that I do this project on my own. So I could have an archivist, I could have an intern. But I'm going so fast trying to keep up with the news and create this record that I haven't had a lot of time to look at it conceptually and step back. But what I did is I just emptied every bin and I just started to sort them, and you start to see patterns. So you sort some pieces by names, and I mean, we're going back to Alexander Vindman, we're going back to Megyn Kelly, we're going back to all these different people that are mentioned by name, and then that was too overwhelming, so I went by themes because themes emerge. So the greatest number of pieces sort of reflect a kind of, it's not a poll exactly, but it tells you which quotes people felt the most compelled to stitch, and whatever that tells you, you even have a better answer than I do. But grab them by the pussy, build a wall. They're quotes that just come forward, and they're issues that come forward because they matter to people. And so the largest piles were quotes about women, immigration, climate, and COVID. And all different pieces. So those were the pieces that compelled people to stitch things, and quotes from all different sources. And I should be very clear that anyone can participate in Tiny Pricks Project. It doesn't matter what your politics are. It just so happens that I don't know that I've had a lot of Trump supporters participate, but they certainly could. The rules were pretty, or the guidelines really were designed to invite anyone to join.
But it's like you've got one of those, like word clouds where they see the big phrases. You've got you've got this amazing infographic that's been handmade and crowdsourced by people that you can probably pull apart and put back together in all these different ways. But yeah, it occurs to me that people take the time to stitch things that have importance to them. So if you're getting a lot of those kind of anti-feminine statements being made, or ones to do with climate or whatever, that's the word cloud's strong, isn't it? Those are resonating with the people who want to put those pieces of work forward. So it's a great mood reflector, something like that. I think it's kind of, I don't know if it's unique to the nature of embroidery and needlework to do that, but I mean, one of the other thoughts I had is that each of those pieces is someone standing up and going, no, this isn't true. It's almost like there's just a collection of truth beacons or something. Do you know what I mean? People just going, this is wrong, this is gone, we are being mass lighted, which I think is when they try and gaslight a lot of people or something.
Well, I was going to say, it's interesting because as you say that, inside of my head I was thinking, no, but people also stitch words they love, but the truth is they don't. They're not as compelled. And it does remove traditionally embroidery from this kind of optimistic, like home is where the heart is sort of message. I didn't get a lot of Biden quotes. I didn't have people messaging me asking if they could submit Biden quotes. The Biden quote that resonated the most for people in my project was when he spoke about his son, about Hunter's addiction.
Yeah.
I love my son. My son has a problem. It transcended the moment, and it just showed you who he was. There are a lot of other things you might feel, but in that case, a lot of people reacted to that piece. So I should explain that I went from a period when the project was, first it was private, it was just me. And I needed a lot of help because I started just doing one. I did one. 2018. I didn't even touch Trump for 2 years. I was doing other projects. I did one. I posted it. My 50 followers liked it. I was like, oh, this could scratch an itch. So Trump won't last very long. Every week I'll stitch a quote of his. And at the end, I'll have a funny little exhibit of maybe 100 pieces. And we'll say, oh my gosh, yes, that happened. I could not have imagined this, but I couldn't keep up. And the more I started grabbing these quotes, like just pulling them off of Twitter, I thought this one has to be there. This one has to be there. And then they start to speak to each other. And then you think, well, this one would be missing if I didn't do this one. I have huge financials, and it just goes on. And then a friend said, oh, would you like some help? Why don't I organize a workshop? And I don't even know if we called it a workshop. It's probably just like get together. And there were 6 or 7 women. And this is around the time of the Megyn Kelly quote, or people were talking about it again. And this group of women sat around talking about sort of sexual harassment in the workplace and what they'd experienced. And they stitched a piece. And then I saw that it was much better public. It was much better. It wasn't about me posting something that people would react to. It was about people looking at the language with intention, looking for a piece to stitch. And you search differently. It's like research almost. And you're thinking about it differently instead of just swipe.
Yeah.
So I feel like it belonged in the public. And now but then I had to end it somehow because it got so big.
Yeah.
I mean, I would get 10 to 20 packages a day at one point.
I've had that situation, just to interject. Have you ever had to go to the postman and go, no, this is like an art project. I'm not like into drug dealing or anything. This is all like legit because there's so many like padded envelopes coming through.
Well, it was, I have to say, it infused me with a real kind of nostalgia, which was fitting with the material, not the text, but to get packages in the mail. Is this really gives you a warm feeling. And people would send me notes and send me textiles. And it was strange to get so much mail, but I loved it because it was an additional effort. I can send you an email very quickly, but if I send you a letter, there are these other steps involved. And I think it sort of drew me closer to participants. I mean, some of the letters were really moving, and some people sent me, statements, and some people explained why they didn't want their names released with the post. There's just so much going on and so much information. So once it became, but it had to end, and it did. I said, when he's out of office, it'll end.
And he won't be back. There'll be no chance of that. I get a real break from this.
Right. And then there was the insurrection. And so that actually needed some time to process. And so since then, it's remained positive and negative. The pieces have been, just started tracking all sorts of different things. And then I went back to poetry and writers and things I loved. And now it's back to the current election for the next 95 days.
Although I saw you posted Simone Biles' quote the other day.
I just did one 10 minutes ago. Yes. Some of the... So, I mean, okay, I can't resist some. I mean, she said, she tweeted, I guess, I love my black job. And so now I'm sure it's the same way for you. Your hands have to catch up to your vision, because I can see that piece stitched. So then I have like quickly, map it out, put the hoop on, thread the needle, and try to get it out, and just as quickly as I can.
Can you remember? Can you remember what it was about the phrase "I am a stable genius" that got you so agitated that it activated the whole thing?
I'm a very stable genius.
That was the first one you did, right?
No, it's the first one I did. I think because at some point in my life, I always thought it was great to be a genius. Everyone wanted to be a genius. But then I realized that there were a lot of challenges in being a genius. I'd read Andrew Solomon's book, Far from the Tree, where he talks about differences, and that being a genius being extremely gifted is very challenging. And so I thought about it and that's why I think he qualified stable.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Where there are a lot of, there can be evil genius as well. And it just struck me as one of those statements that could be read in a lot of different ways. There's a way in which he is doing something that no one else has been able to do before. So there's brilliance is the wrong word, but there's something he knows how to do. And so that's self-aware to me in a way. But to say yourself that you're a very stable genius was just enough that I could stitch it and I could see how long it would take. And I was very shy about overcommitting. But it just summed up absolutely everything that he was saying, everything that he's about, and what he imagines his appeal to be, which is to be very smart. Or you could substitute powerful, wealthy, all these different things, which says something about our values, that he thought that that was what would really, not I'm a kind person, I'm a good person, but I'm a very stable genius. So it just worked.
It sounds sometimes like the sort of thing a 5-year-old boy would say. It's one of those, isn't it?
Yes.
Like, I am the greatest long jumper ever, having like jumped about 1.5 feet or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. And it has that, it doesn't make any sense, but it is so bold, and it is exactly what he thinks. That is true. So in this sense, it is the truth of what he thinks. So that was the first one. I can't remember the second one. It was the early days. There were a lot about his Ivanka and his daughter, but it also sort of important to realize that even then we were not. There's so much more information now, even that to catch phrases, I was and am interested in what we can remember. And how much this process can help us remember the things that are said. And I can tell now, having stitched thousands of pieces, that it's hard to remember. I thought that the hands and the work would help with, remembering, because I realized that we don't have, Trump probably won't have a presidential library, all this documentation. We don't own our social media accounts. I don't own my Instagram account. It's not mine. So trying to create something physical, and there are a lot of people who've asked me whether or not there's a physical collection. They sort of like, they see it on Instagram and it's like, oh yes, there's a post, but to see the pieces in person is very different.
It's in the orangery. You just got them arranged every day. You just build another wall and add a few more.
Yeah, but it's interesting to think about, because on the phone everything looks the same. We put it in the same box, and these textiles are all different sizes, weight. They have a real life to them when you see them in person.
Do you recollect when, after you'd stitched that first one, did it feel like you'd scratched an itch? Was there a bit of a sense of relief? Obviously, you then continued, so you were aware of its power as a sort of therapeutic tool, which undeniably all of these are. I think that's why people do it. But I just wonder, upon reflection, whether and each time you do it, does it now feel like not so much scratching in it, just maybe squeezing a spot or something, because you've done so many of them? But, is there a sense of relief? Do you feel like I've overcome something through the process of making that quote?
I think that I felt uncomfortable having Trump as a president, for me personally. And I know it's different for different people. So I'll just sort of, maybe I can speak in more general terms. To find yourself in a position where you're inactive and you feel compelled to somehow be active. It might be something that happens at your child's school. It might be something that happens in the workplace. Wherever you are, to see something and feel that your character is called upon to respond in some way, and not to be able to, is not a good feeling. So what I did feel is that on my terms, I was responding to the Trump presidency. I was responding to this political moment. And that's become very hard. I will confess to you that impulse now feels different. So there isn't the same satisfaction or squeezing or scratching, these bodily kind of, movements that you were describing as feeling, so much as I'm trying to find the spaces where I can be truthful to who I am and truthful to what I know and what I don't know. So there are a lot of conflicts and issues that I'm now called upon, or people suggest that I should, by comment on, I mean make a piece, which is really now sort of commentary. And I don't feel I have the skills to do that at this time, or and I still feel, sometimes I feel a little bit between being the artist and being I'm very clear with people. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a pundit. But once you are known for what you do, then you also respond to what you do. So I think that the answer is, now it feels more like I'm catching raindrops, and I am trying to grab these different quotes that will help people and help me sort of process this moment. And I guess the example I would give you, an itch, or what I'm trying to catch right now, are Harris quotes.
Right.
Because I'm very interested in her, and I'm interested in the language to see if it's changed, to see how it's different from Biden and from other candidates. And I don't know yet until I stitch, 100 pieces, and I sort of see, well, what is she saying? How is she reacting to things? What are the sound bites? Because generally I'm, at this point, stitching sound bites. For a long time I was stitching, I have very long pieces about all different Trump issues and different quotes about his relationship with China and Russia. And I went into sort of documentation of things, and some pieces are very long and labor intensive. And now most pieces are shorter. So I can sort of bring a lot more voices into this space, like Simone Biles. I mean, how can you resist? So that makes me happy. That gives me some joy. So now I'm. It's a different feeling. It's once it's solidified and it's an actual project that has its own history.
But that's the.
I
mean, because
I'm related.
Yeah. Sorry, it's curious to me, because it started out as something that was just very personal, and then it became a sort of personal thing that people contributed to. But at somewhere there must have been a tipping point where suddenly you were like, this thing's got like significance. And in the same way as the Bayeux tapestry is used to capture a moment in history through textiles, you've kind of created a crowdsourced version of that, which comes then with its own gravity and its own responsibility. And I guess what I'm hearing you say is that now you feel that there's a duty to make that about as well formed as is possible. So you can't just nonchalantly stitch something that catches your eye, because now you've got to place it within this context of how it fits and how it adds to the chronology that perhaps you're presenting.
Yes, and this is a question I sort of have for you too, which is that I sometimes wonder, am I doing the same thing over and over again? I mean, artists generally move from one kinds of topic to another. They exhaust one medium. They can't, do the same kind of work anymore. They've made the last one. Unless a, incredible opportunity arises, they're not going to make another one of those. And I don't know where I fit, because my technique is not advanced in any particular way. I haven't changed my medium. I am still just right here in this community, sort of, swimming around. But I am aware that, I don't know, gratitude is the right word, but I'm aware that I'm in this with a group of people, and we may agree or disagree, but I feel very lucky to be able to share some of the things that I'm thinking about. So this sort of moves us into sort of a conversation about social media and how it's used, because my work exists because of this sort of hybrid. I don't know if it's hybrid interaction anymore, but the making, going from a quote, from a tweet, something on social media, to a physical textile, and then back onto social media. And so I haven't exhausted that path yet. But do you find that, have you reached a point in certain projects that you've been doing where you've thought, this is enough? Or have there been projects that sort of have continued more or less in the same way, but the meaning keeps
I
evolving.
think, very kind of you to ask. It's interesting because a lot of the crowdsourced projects I've done have usually come with a deadline. So, you know, whether it's like a project at the with the National Trust where I did a tree and they had cross-stitch baubles on them, you know, that had a delivery date. So they were quite deliberate. And so there's a certain finiteness to that and you can get a sense of closure. But then sometimes if I think about the overarching things that I do, and you know, I sit there and I think, well, I'm not an artist, and because I don't have the time to put in to bare my soul through a creative means like that. But I recognize that I'm a curator and I'm a sort of a conversation haver. Is that word? So it's almost like I feel like sometimes things evolve, and one thing I've become quite aware of is how well things fit within me. So, for instance, doing the podcast is something that I feel a really good fit for. When I started doing it, I was like, yeah, this is like the right energy feeling inside my body because it's something that's the natural evolution of where I've come from. And I feel like in your situation, I don't think you're finished with this project yet, because if there were, I feel like you would start to get an inkling around the back of your head of what the next step was. You know, it's kind of weird. Recently, our dog died, and I was able to come up with a cross stitch idea for the first time in ages. We've now got a puppy. It's not that I don't have that idea anymore. I definitely don't have the time for it. But I was very interested to see how that feeling kind of crept around the back of my head of a new idea and just kind of moseys up. And I feel like that's usually the surest sign that you're getting to a point where you are ready to change. Whereas it feels to me from what you've said, you know, you've just got all those pieces back out and laid them out on a table and had a look at them. And it's almost like you're reprising the whole situation, but it doesn't feel like you're done yet. And the story isn't done yet. You know, maybe when he pops his clogs and eventually goes back to whichever planet or sphere of existence he came from in the first place, maybe that'll be the point when you can go, right, I can offer this up as a historical record, and then you can go off and do something completely different. But if the inkling's not there, I'm guessing that's because you're not done yet. Does that seem?
I think sometimes I wonder if I'm trying to. Yeah, that all resonates. And I'm sorry about
No,
your
that's all right.
dog.
It's all right. It's all right. He's a good boy.
We lost our dog of 13 years, and people had lost dogs before. My friends have lost dogs and stuff. I was like, "Why is a dog?" But now I totally get it. And we got a puppy, so I feel you.
Yeah.
You're kind of
We
like,
do a whole another episode about what it's like to have a puppy that just chews everything.
Yeah, and why do we think that we're gonna, when we get a puppy, we're just gonna get the mature dog that we had before, sort of right away?
Honestly.
What is that amnesia? It's like childbirth. Yeah, you know what? As you're talking, and it's so nice to hear you talk about your work too, because I thought I was imposing a deadline. I did think, I had a deadline when he's out of office. I think what I kept doing is stitching all of these different quotes, and a lot of them what I'd call the balm for the bombastic, so the positive quotes, because maybe it's a counterbalance. Maybe when I have as many positive pieces or hopeful or alternative pieces to that, the weight, I don't just mean the physical weight of what I went through, sorted through 3 weeks ago, but the weight, I think about one of the things I like about Harris is how many younger voters have registered. I mean, I'm 55. I want my kids to vote. I want my kids, and my youngest is now voting age. This will be his first election. But for two of my other kids, these have been their choices have been, dominated by this particular, not just Trump, but this kind of these kinds of politics. So maybe then when there's something to counterbalance, maybe when I feel like I've found all of that other language.
I mean, that's usually what I just find is like that. Like when the idea comes to you, it's because you're ready to get the idea without wishing to sound too namaste about it. But at the same time, like every single conversation I've ever had with someone, it's always like the ideas come when you're ready. And it might be that you'll just hear a song lyric that will stick in the back of your head for a while, in the same way as someone going, "I'm a stable genius" was enough to rile you, whatever the creative path is. But I think that in the same way as I started out doing cross stitch, because I thought it was funny, and then I kind of did a lot of the tropes of like sweary cross stitch and the novelty of being a man, and then found myself in a position of curation, I feel like your path has pretty much been exactly the same thing, because you started out doing your little thing, and here you are now curating exhibitions, and we haven't even got talking about the book, which we are going to get talking about, but it's that same kind of path. And sometimes it's just like you're on this raft and there's a river that's taking you somewhere, and you just have to, if you're lucky enough, you can tell you're on a raft in the first place. But like with me, I don't know whether I'm insecure because I see so many amazing textile artists that I don't feel like there's any point in competing. But at the same time, I just think, well, actually, my strengths more often than not are having conversations like this. That's the thing that I'm good at. And so maybe it turns out that this is the place where I'm meant to be in the scheme of things. I'm meant to be the dispel people's preconceptions about needlework guy or something, But it's just, I think then, like with me, like doing the podcast, the idea came along. I'm currently involved in some projects in my hometown as well, looking to see whether we can create an art gallery and re-stimulate the cultural conversation there. And that's another one of those things. It's just about those kind of movements. You find yourself being around the edges of the scene rather than being people putting stuff into the middle of the scene. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. It does. I will say that what you're doing is a lot of work. I know, you're doing research. Your invitation to participate really included, as an artist, addressed every anxiety or concern I might have. And I don't mean the technical anxieties, but what it means to share your work. And I think you said something like, my job is to make you shine. And that is more, I think you and I, we use the word curate, but I think what we're also talking about is how can we help people feel better? And I've had people who say that, this project got me through the last, X years, 4 years, 6 years, whatever it's going to be. And I don't really think that means I did. I think this process, this whole idea that we can be together and appreciate this seemingly, it's not mundane at all, but as we're talking about, I'm not spending hours and days on a piece. I can't do that. And so I always think of it as what is the time investment and how does that mean the skill set? And I love looking at work that people have spent more time making, but I can't do that. But I know that I'm eager to have a conversation and give people things sort of immediately. And so the trade-off is, and when you're doing actual interaction in your community, then you really are focusing on the in-person, on the interaction, and what comes out of it is, it comes out of it. I remember I was very interested in art therapy originally, and I remember when I learned that to be an art therapist, you were practicing your art in parallel with other people. You weren't teaching them as an artist. And I think when you take an art course, you go to your art teacher to expect them to teach you something. And I'm just doing my embroidery right beside you. I mean, I might know some things, I might show, here's a few shortcuts, but we're really on a parallel path. And I've felt that way when the project was public. I would give workshops to spend time with people and to assure them that, this is not that hard. That's what I keep saying. I think that's a different message than this is challenging and I alone can do it. I've never said those words. That is probably a good segue to my book, because that is true. I do believe that the work I do, is, and I don't know if that's the difference between craft and art, but I just say to people, how do you do it? And I just said, I just, that's how I spent my time. That's what I chose to do with my time. And you could do that too. But you choose, you're choosing to do something else, which is fine, of course. But it is possible to do what I do.
It reminded me of a quote I heard on a podcast recently. There's a guy called George Mack, and he talks about the illusion of adults and how when you're a child, you look at adults and you think that like they know what's going on because they're adults. And then you become an adult and you realize that no adult actually knows what's going on. We're all just doing the best we can and hanging on in there. And it's just like there's this illusion like the perfect horse. There's just this illusion of an adult as someone who's really got their act together, and it's the same thing. But I think, but a part of that release is as you said, it's not going, I'm better than you. Like if I'm ever teaching or trying to facilitate, all I'm doing is going, I've done this, I've yet to be struck by lightning, it's really good for you, why don't you try it? Not I'm so much better than you because I'm clearly outclassed by a lot of the people I know. But I think you're right, and I think that's almost like the ideal teaching perspective, is to have that humility, to just go, we're all in this together. And I wanted to ask you, this might make sense, but I wanted to ask you if you can remember the first piece you got from somebody else.
Okay, wait a minute. I think so. We haven't talked about it, but I had a project before Tiny Pricks Project.
Okay.
And that's Interwoven Stories. And that is also still a public project. There are over 400 what look like fabric 3-hole lined pages. And I did this project through the Arts Council of Princeton as an artist in residency, and people are invited to take this fabric piece of notebook paper and stitch into it a response to a kind of cultural mapping prompt. So what is your sense of memory of a place? What makes a place memorable? How does place impact identity? And we did it in Princeton, New Jersey, in the community. And people would stitch about their favorite walk. They would stitch about a community garden. They would stitch about the local mayor whom they admired. They would stitch about all the different memories they had. And those pages were the first pieces that were given back to me in a public project. And I don't remember the first page, but what I remember was the feeling. And this is going to sound a little crazy, but when someone has a baby and they say to you, do you want to hold the baby? and you hold their baby and you think, how can it be that I'm holding this baby that's so specific to this other person, so amazing, and they trust me to hold it? So I remember the feeling of getting the pieces, and that feeling has never stopped. That feeling has remained throughout this whole project, to have somebody give me something. So maybe they're all first. I mean, I have this feeling of it never gotten old to me. Interwoven Stories is 400 pages. I just installed some at a store in Nantucket, Crisps, and I was looking at these pages again, and people talking about taking the ferry, about sunsets, about walks with their dogs. Very beautiful. So I have a feeling about the firsts, and I've retained that feeling of sort of real. It's a real honor to hold this work for so many people.
Yeah, definitely.